Welcome back everybody to another week of data visualization in Python. So this week we are going to learn how to create this dashboard. This is a really neat dashboard about the COVID-19 virus that's afflicting the world. So we're going to create a data table and we're going to allow the user to filter the data table, to sort the data table, maybe by countries or maybe by deaths. They can also filter them by, for example, I want all those rows above 100 deaths, or maybe I want all those cases that are below 5,000, so all those countries below 5,000 cases, and so on and so on and so on. We'll also be able to allow the user to choose certain countries which will populate this pie chart and this line chart. Now there are no countries chosen, so the default countries are these. But if the user chooses, let's say, Albania and Australia, Argentina, and maybe let's choose, I don't know, India, then we get a chart of all these countries, a line chart that represents the time from January all the way to March, represents deaths, or you can change it to cases for these 4 countries. You'll also learn how to change the timelines. If you want only to focus on March 1st, maybe you want to focus only from March 15th to March 29th, you can see all that. You'll also be able to change cases here on the drop down from cases to deaths and change here the percentage in the pie chart. You'll see now it's a comparison between the 4 different countries and their total death, their death toll for the countries. You can also take some out. You'll learn how to take Argentina out, or maybe keep Argentina in. Take here Australia and Albania out, so you're only left with, let's say, India and Argentina. So all this, let's unclick this chart. Unfilter. All these you're going to learn how to do right now with Dash by Plotly. We're going to use this data that is in the video and below the video in the description. Just open it and open the links. This is one of the links. It'll lead you to the data. The data is taken from some kind of European center. They collect this every day, but I'm going to add the website that you can upload newer dates, because this only goes up to March 29, so you can upload new information all the way to April 5th and play around with it if you want. We're just going to focus on these different 3 columns: the country, the deaths, and the cases. And you can see it has like 60 or 70 days per country. We're going to do that data and open another link below is this code, so you can follow along. Just make sure to open this code and the other 3 links that are right here, also under the video below. Please open them so you can follow along. All right, so focusing on the code, let's get started and create this dashboard. All right, so the first thing you want to do is you want to import these libraries. We're going to use Plotly, this version, and we're going to use this version of Dash, although you can use similar versions if you have them already. If you don't have them, just pip install. If you don't know how to do this, just click on the video above to see how to install a virtual environment using Anaconda and installing Plotly and or Dash in it. It'll take you about 5-10 minutes and you'll be ready to go. All right, so the first thing you want to do is you want to start your app like this. This is a line to start the app. And then we're going to read the Excel sheet into a Pandas data frame right here. And this is where the data is taken from, so you can actually get new data if you want. Just copy this link to get more up-to-date data. And the last thing we're going to do with the data is we're going to group it. We're going to call it DFF, and we're going to group by the countries. So I don't want to see every single day all the way to January 1st. I just want to see the total per country. I want to see their total death rate and their total case rate. So as you can see, if you print it, this is what you come up with: the country and then their total death and their total cases. All right, so you have this. And now you can start. So here's the app layout equals, and then you put a div. All this is actually the layout of the page. This is how the page is going to look like. So the first div is going to be an all-encompassing div. It's going to go all the way down here. It's going to cover everything. And inside this div, this page, I'm going to create different divs. Divs are just ways to divide up the sections of the page. So the first div inside the main one is going to be here. It's going to be one row. Okay, and it's going to be the data table. We're going to focus on the data table. All right. I'm not going to go over every single one of these parameters. If you want to go into more detail of how a data table functions and all the different things you can do with a data table, you can do two things. You can either go into my playlist that's called -DataTable, and it gives you different tutorials about the data table and how to play around with it or how to manipulate it. Or just use the link that I gave you below, and you'll see this first link talks about the references. It talks about the DataTable References, so you can read all the different parameters here if you want to understand what it is, and which is also another way to learn how to use data table. But just the basics, I'm going to give it this ID, DataTable ID. Remember this ID because we're going to use it below. I'm going to read the records, the information, the data frame information that we built into the data table data. So it's kind of like the rows. And I'm going to read the columns of the data frame. You see for I in data DFF columns, I'm going to read it into the data table columns. We're going to edit editable fall, so we're not going to allow the user to edit the data table. We're going to say row selectable multi, so they can select multi rows and not only one, and a few other things. Again, if you want to learn more about the data table, just go into the -DataTable playlist. If you want to see this data table in a different way, right now it is like this, right? There's like 33 different pages, and you can only see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows per page, and that is because we put page size 6 and current 0. But if you want to see it like all in one, what you can do is just hashtag this out, these 3 rows, and hashtag this in. Make sure that you always have you always define the column width for this. Here we're defining it by percentage, and then go back and you'll see that once this uploads, that everything is in one page. You can just scroll down and you'll see from Afghanistan all the way down to Zimbabwe. All right, this is another way of looking at data tables. It's actually in this link right here, the second one, and it explains a little bit how this is done and what is actually behind all of this. So obviously click on that link, and this is what it looks like. Again, it's the same thing. You can choose different rows, but this is what it looks like. We're going to go back to using the same way we did before. Okay, the original way. All right, so this is a -data table. Once you're done with this, you close the row. Then you go into the second div. The second div is going to be from here all the way down here. You see, it's going to be another row right under the data table. And in this row, we're going to focus on the drop-down. We're going to have 2 divs. One is going to be the first drop-down, and the second one is going to be the second drop-down. Each one is 6 columns of the drop-down. The first drop-down is going to be a line drop-down, and the second drop-down is going to be the pie drop-down. It's just an ID. They're the same thing, they're drop-downs, but later on, I'm going to refer to these IDs when I'm going to connect the data. Okay, the drop-down has many different parameters you can use. We're using options, value, multi, and clearable. So we're using 4 here, but it has like 10 different parameters. If you want to learn more about the drop-down, just click on the video above, and you'll see a detailed video on the drop-down that can teach you a lot more than what I'm going to teach you here. Okay, but this is what you need for the basics. So for the basics, you just want to define the options. The options are the values that the user is going to see in the dropdown. So we're just saying the user is going to see deaths and cases. Those 2 options in those 2 values in the dropdowns. You have to connect them to the value, which is actually the Excel column. Deaths, and the Excel column is cases. You see the cases is with small c and deaths with a small d, because that is how it is spelled in the Excel column that we are using in the data frame. Case is and death. And this is what you use from the Excel column, deaths and cases, and this is what actually the user sees. So I'm putting here deaths, but if you want the users to see all deaths, or however you want to say it, you can just put it that way as well. Soon we'll see how this looks like. Same thing here, pie drop down. I'm going to use the same options. I'm going to use deaths and cases, and I'm going to use value. The default value is going to be cases. That's the default value is the first value that appears on the page when it loads. So look, pi dropdown, cases is a default value. Let's see. Pi dropdown right here, cases is a default value. See how cases is default value? And you see how we change under the line dropdown, we change it to all deaths. Right here, all deaths. So it still refers to the deaths column in the Excel sheet, but now the user sees it as all deaths. Okay, you can call it whatever you want. All right, so we said value is going to be cases. This is the default value that you're going to see on the page as it loads. Multi is going to be false because you're only going to, multi-false means that the user can only choose one value at a time. They cannot choose multiple values like death and cases and whatever. And clearable false means they cannot clear it. It can only be, there's always going to be or death or cases, always going to be a value in the dropdown. It cannot be clearable. Okay, that's going to be another row. And after the dropdown, we're going to create graphs. This is the last div, is the last row, and it's going to have two graphs. One graph is going to be in this div, is going to be 6 columns, and this the second graph is going to be another 6 columns. It's going to be the line chart graph, and this is going to be the pie chart graph. Now, this is just how the pages lay out. This, you're not connecting the data yet. There's nothing there, because if I hashtag this out and load it, you'll see if I just have this in my script, all it gives you is the table and the dropdowns and space for graphs. Let it load. You see, it just gives you the default values and dropdowns. It gives you the data table, but it doesn't give you the graph because there's nothing there. And you can change this, but it doesn't mean anything because we haven't connected the data yet. Okay, so this is what you're going to see up to now. Now, what we want to do is we're going to connect all this data to the graphs so we actually can see how the graphs populate according to the rows that the user chooses. All right? Okay, so to do this, what you have to focus on is in Dash is you have to create the app callback. The app callback decorator reads the information, and then using a function and defining the function, you actually take that information and you output whatever you want to output. In this case, the graph. All right, so let's see this breakdown and see how it works and why it works this way. So you can create this at home, or at least understand why this how this works at home. Okay, so the first thing in the app decorator, you want to make sure that you have input and output. You have a list of outputs and you have a list of inputs. The list of inputs is what you are going to have the user, what you are going to say is the information that you are going to use in order to create these graphs. You can use many different types of inputs. In this case, all I want is the pi dropdown, the ID of the pi dropdown. I want its value. Why is that? Because pi dropdown value is, where is pi dropdown? Pi dropdown, its value is cases. Or any of these can be, or death. Death and cases can be its value. So I'm going to take that, what the user chooses. And I'm also going to take the line drop value, what the user chooses in the drop-down line drop. And I'm also going to take the selected rows. The data table ID has another parameter called selected rows, right? Let's make sure that is true, and I'm not making this up. Selected rows, this is our data table, and the selected rows are right here. So right now it's empty. As it loads, it's an empty list because the first thing when it loads is empty. There's nothing. The user didn't choose any rows, so it's going to be an empty list. But eventually, they're going to choose something. So I want to make sure to have the Dash app remember what the user chooses. So to do that, I use input. And then the output is actually what the information is going to affect. I want the input. With the input, I want to create the pie chart figure and the line chart figure. Pie chart is called pie chart because that's the ID. Let's see here, line chart and pie chart. You see, those are the ID, and that is why you put in the output the ID name. Now the figure is just a parameter within a DCC graph. DCC graph has different parameters. One of the parameters is ID. The other component is a figure. So that's why we're using figure. And by putting a figure in there, you'll be able to draw the graph. Okay, so we have the input, we have the output because we know what we want to create with. And now we're going to define the function that is actually going to put everything together. One important thing to remember is that the function, you can call it whatever you want. I call it update graph. and the arguments inside the function refer to the inputs. So there's 3 inputs here, selected rows, value, and value. They are going to refer to, that means I need 3 different arguments here. I'm going to call the first one chosen rows. The first one is this. The second one, pie drop val, is going to be this. Or the line drop val is going to be this. You can call it the same names. I just prefer to call it differently because I like these names more. So remember, this number 3 arguments has to be equal to 3 inputs. If you only have 2 inputs, you can only put two arguments in here. And it's by order. So the first one is this one. The second one is this one. By drop down and value, and so on and so on. And then you have all the information in here, which we'll go over to create the chart inside the function. But important to remember that when you're returning the function, you're returning the outputs. So remember, output we had 2. We had 2 figures for the pie chart and the line chart. So I'm going to return 2 arguments here, the pie chart and the line chart argument, which is actually built inside the function because that's the object I created inside the function. But important thing to remember, if you have 2 outputs, figure, then you have to return two arguments inside your return section. Okay, so let's get started. Let's create this. All right. So the first thing we want to create is the pie chart. All right. We are going to look. What we are going to do is we are going to have the user choose certain rows, and based on that rows, create a pie chart. So let's say they choose Albania, and let's choose Afghanistan. That is going to create that's going to upload and create and populate the pie chart. All right. So again, it's based on rows. All right. It's based on what the user chooses in the DataTable rows. So because it's based on rows, we're actually going to see, that's why we have this argument in here, chosen rows, right? That's actually equal to this, the DataTable ID, the component is selected rows. So if length of chosen rows equals 0, and why is this? This is important to put in here because chosen rows at the beginning is always going to be equal 0. When you first upload the Dash app like this, there's nothing, no rows are chosen. So you have to tell Dash or the Dash app what to do when no rows are chosen. If not, it'll create an error. So if the length of chosen rows equals 0, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a data frame with these 4. I'm going to filter my data frame with these 4 countries. If I don't do this, I'll just have an empty chart because I don't have a data frame, and I'll have an empty graph like we saw before. But I want to have something, so I chose that the user will see by default. They'll see these 4 countries. All right. So I'm gonna I filter the data frame, so the data frame is gonna have these 4 countries. I created a copy of it. Always create a copy. The DFF is the original data frame that you have outside of here. Remember, outside of the app layout, DFF. Don't manipulate that. Always when you're inside the function, you create copies of your data frame. So I'm creating a data frame filtered, which is a filtered data frame with these countries. So here I have rows with 4 rows because it's 4 different countries. Else means if the length of the chosen rows is not 0, means it's 1 or 2 or whatever the user chose, then I'm going to create the same filtered. I'm going to the same object, the data frame filtered, but I'm going to index those rows. So I'm going to filter the data frame according to the number of rows chosen. What is this chosen rows? This is this chosen rows, and this is actually a list. Let's see actually what it creates. Let's run this right now. Let's choose some rows. I'm going to choose row Albania and Algeria. So I put print here just so you can see. You don't need this, but what this shows us is when they chose that, it actually chose, where is it? Let's go all the way down. You see 1 and 2. I put Albania and Algeria is ID number 1 and ID number 2 in the row, in the data table. So we know that chosen row is the same as saying list 1, 2, rows number 1 and 2, and this is how the data frame is filtered. Perfect. So now we have a filtered data frame by the rows that were chosen, or a filtered data frame by these rows that have these countries. If it just started and no rows are chosen. And now that I have the filtered data frame, now I can actually populate the pie chart because now I have the pie chart. this is how you create a pie chart. Again, I'm not going to go over the very too much detail inside the Plotly Express pie chart, because if you wanted to do that, you can just click on the video above, and you can see all about the Plotly Express pie chart. And I go into a lot of detail of all the different parameters you can create in the pie chart. But now for this, you only need a few parameters. If you want more information, just go to Plotly Express, the link that's below the video, and just click here on this is the line chart you can click. We're going to do later, and you can click down here below on the pie chart, and you'll see all the different parameters that I have in the separate video. But here you only need about 2 or 3. So the first one is a data frame. You need a data frame. The data frame is going to be the data frame that we filtered, either with these countries or the countries that the user chose. The name is going to be the countries. Per slice is going to be the name of the country, and the values is going to be the pie drop val. Now, what is the pie drop val? The pie drop val is this right here. It's the second argument of the function, and the second argument of the function is right here, is a pie drop down value. So it's the value that the user chose, or that's there by default, which I think is cases. All right. So this is actually the same as saying, in this case, cases, right? If the user chooses deaths, this will automatically go into deaths, all right? But you can't obviously print there every time you want to change something. You have the user change that, and that's why you need the argument from inside the function. Pie drop val that is tied to this input, all right? So there you have it. This is how we created the pie chart. With this pie chart, we are actually tying the drop down. So let's say I refresh this page and there's no rows chosen. We're going to have China, Spain, Italy, and I think it was Iran right here in the pie chart. And the cases is the default value. But if I choose, let's say, Albania and Algeria and Afghanistan, these are going to change because now the user chose different rows. And give it a second to load. And now I have these 3 countries, and it shows the distribution of cases between those 3 countries. I can also change this to deaths because I can change the value of the drop down. Okay, great. So the line chart. The line chart is a bit more complicated because we are playing around with the timeline from January all the way to March. We need to show this data on the line chart. But this data doesn't exist in the data frame, the DFF that we created. You see way on top here, we created a DFF that we grouped by country and deaths and cases. So we didn't have any years to it. We took out all the time. So if we want to show the time based on the countries that the user chooses, I'm just going to use the original DF that has all this information. It has all the dates for every single country, right? So remember, we got to use the original DF for the line chart. And to do that, what we're going to do first I'm going to put into a list. What this does, it extracts the list of chosen countries. So if the user chooses, for example, Albania and Afghanistan, what we're going to do is we have the DF filtered according to what they chose, right? They chose the first line of code here is they're choosing, they're filtering the data frame by the countries that they want, right? So we actually filtered it. We have DF filtered. So we're going to take this DF filter, we're going to put it here, and we're going to say, give me the countries and put those countries to a list. I want to see a list of countries. So this is the same as saying, if they chose Albania, this is the same as saying Albania, and whatever and whatever and so on and so on and so on, right? So I'm going to take this list. I'm actually going to put it in here because I'm going to sort the original, or filter, not sort, filter the original data frame countries by the countries that was chosen. So this line is exactly the same as this line here, right? But it's actually given me the list of countries that was already chosen by the user here, or by default if the length of chosen rows was 0. So just a quick way of creating this new data frame. This new data frame line is going to have the countries that was chosen, but it's going to be the original data frame. So it's going to have all the dates in there as well. It's going to have March and all the days and January and February. And with this filter data frame, we can actually create the line chart. All right, and the line chart is another Plotly Express graph that you can create. I have a video tutorial above here. It's actually this scatter plot, but it's very similar to the line chart. If you know, line chart is just a version of the scatter plot. So if you want to look at the video, learn all about the scatter plot. If you know the scatter plot very well and you master it after that video, then you'll easily be able to create a line chart because there's only one or two different parameters. So this line chart, the same thing we have to do. We have to define the data frame or tell it what it is, and we're going to use the data frame line. We have to give it an x-axis and a y-axis. The x-axis is going to be the date rep, y date rep, because that is what we have on the Excel sheet. You see, the first one is date rep. So now that is inside our data frame. Right here, data frame line actually has that column, so this is going to be inside here. And if you don't know actually what's inside that column, just feel free to print. Just go print df line, and maybe just print the first 5 rows, right? Just print it, and then you'll see exactly what columns are in there, and based on those columns, you can populate the line chart. Okay. All right, so the x-axis is going to be the date, the y-axis is going to be the line drop val. This, again, remember, the line drop val is actually the third argument inside our function, which actually refers to the line drop down value, which is this, the line drop down value. The line drop down ID and the value is deaths, but it can also be cases according to what, depending on what the user chooses. All right. So we're taking the line drop value, whatever that is, cases or deaths. We're going to divide it up by different colors. So every country is going to be a different color. Just going to change the labels a little bit. And then we have ourselves a line chart. You see, this line chart is based on what the user chooses. They have Afghanistan, Albania, Nigeria because that's what they chose. If they want to use Angola as well, they'll put Angola in there. If they also want to see, let's say, India, I can sort and say, give me all those table where India is there as well. Rows, we only have one row, India. Now India populates here as well. I can change the timeline. I can go in here and just say, just give me from March 8th to March 29, or give me, you can double click if you want to see everything together, or give me from March 15 to March 29, right? Or take out maybe Angola and take out Afghanistan because I only want to see Algeria, Albania, and India. So now you have only 3 of those. Or I don't want to see deaths. Maybe I want to see cases, right? So, double click because it doesn't change. One line I forgot to mention is line chart update layout. You want to put this line of code in there. You can call it full. You can call it whatever you want. This allows the line chart to stay, like if you choose a timeline, this timeline will stay this way even if you change the drop downs. Even if you change this or you change everything, you interact with the map, the timeline is going to stay the same. It's not going to change, right? Take it out if you don't like it and you'll see what happens. Double click to the original value. Okay, so there you have it. We created a line chart, a pie chart. We connected it with drop downs and with a dash data table, which is very useful because there's a lot of cases in life where you have a big data table with a lot of rows and a lot of columns, and this gives the user the capability to play around with those columns. Great. Tip of the week. What I want to share with you today is just my opinion regarding Dash and Plotly. I find these libraries and these tools very useful in creating very powerful dashboards. It could be statistical dashboards, it could be medical dashboard, weather dashboards, or a financial, really whatever dashboard you want, using Dash and Plotly, because it's very user-friendly, it's relatively simple, and it's all in Python. Really what you want to do, the main concept behind Dash Plotly is that it's connecting Plotly Express or just Plotly graphs with dash all these graphs here that you can create with Plotly Express with dash core components, all these core components, checklist or dropdown, graphs, input, date pick, range sliders, and date pickers. So what you really have to do is just learn the basics of the dropdowns that you wanna know how to use, and learn the basics, simple basic Plotly graphs, right? Scatter plot or line plot or the pie chart or the violin, and then with the app decorator that I've showed you, this is what is used to actually connect the Plotly graphs with the dash components. So it's a very simple concept, and I think I love it because I create a lot of different interactive graphs with it, and it's all in Python. So if you want to learn more about how to create these type of dashboards or how to create different Plotly graphs or focus on different drop-down components, just click on one of the videos above here. You have different playlists and different videos, or just subscribe below because my channel talks all about that. And I'm just creating this really for you guys, so you can look at these free tutorials and learn how to do this on your own free time. I hope it's useful for you. Subscribe below, turn on the notification for this channel so every week you'll learn of the new video that comes out, and don't give up.